We have agenda item 14, a Swazi update from Greg Johnson.
Great. Greg Johnson, CWCB staff. Agenda item 14, this is an update on the current status of the statewide water supply initiative. I'm going to be tag teaming this with Russ Sands in the water supply planning section, so we'll be handing off halfway through. So today we wanted to give you an update on where things are at with the study, and really, I think more importantly, where we're at in our messaging, our work with the roundtables, how this fits with everything else. And you'll note a lot of this will look familiar, but a lot of it is really evolving as we speak. We're really streamlining, trying to simplify the process quite a bit to make sure that there's a coherent message about what we're doing with this update. So for example, this timeline, this is a new version of something that you've seen before, but again, trying to make sure that this is a little bit more straightforward as we message this more with the roundtables in the months ahead. So we are in phase 2 of the study, focusing on the evaluation and the analysis for all these different subject matter areas of the statewide water supply initiative. So looking at population, municipal and self-supply industrial demands, ag demands, and really getting into the thick of the modeling work right now as we speak. So important thing to keep in mind as we work with the public and members of the roundtables is what this is, how it fits with the context of all the other studies that were done, and particularly with the timeline, why we're sitting here in 2018 looking to finish the study next year, about a year from now, end of the fiscal year in June of 2019, why there was that gap between 2010 and 2019. The important thing to keep in mind there, of course, is that we had the Basin implementation plans and Colorado's water plan that were completed in the interim in 2015. So when you look at the breadth of the studies to date from 2004 with the original statewide water supply initiative, moving on to 2007 with what was called SWASI 2 at the time, which really focused on a few of those subject matter areas specifically, then the full update in 2010, again, the Basin plans, the water plan in 2015, now it makes sense that we are circling back with a much more thorough update to the whole process with the modeling work, with the scenario planning, with all the other work that we're doing with this current update. So the methodologies, of course, are evolving, as I mentioned, scenario planning, hydrologic modeling, factoring in, again, a look at the municipal and self-supplied industrial demands, the ag demands, how all of that plays together, as well as the environmental and recreational needs on the river, with the flow tool that we will have that really looks at the outputs of the modeling work. So we have been tasked with modeling the 5 different scenarios that this board, as well as the IBCC, came up with, and it was published in the water plan in 2015. So a couple quick examples. We are, again, working on how we really get this message across to folks, not only at the roundtables, but also in the public, and what is different this time around. So for example, we have monthly time series data from all the hydrologic modeling outputs. We have different parameters. So we have stream flow, reservoir contents, unappropriated water, and then resulting gaps. And we have the time series data all along with maximum, minimum acre foot per month, as well as being able to aggregate that data up to wet years, dry years, average years. So we're really taking a hard look now at what this data output is going to be and what's going to make the most sense in terms of how we roll that out to the public, what kinds of graphs we have, what kinds of tables, and what's going to make the most sense to really tell the story with this particular update this time. So a lot of work is being done, again, on the modeling as we speak, but we actually have, just within the last couple of weeks, some of the data outputs that are some of the very preliminary information that we're using as examples to try to really figure out how we're going to put this out there, what's going to make the most sense. And Russ will talk a little bit in more detail about this, but some of the data visualization opportunities that we might have to do some innovative new things to really tell that story. Another quick example with the agricultural modeling, being able to show, again, how things were different from the last time around. So in 2010 with the Statewide Water Supply Initiative, we used state CUs, which is the state's consumptive use model, to look at shortages. So we had agricultural shortage information by water district that was published with that report. We're certainly updating that now with the modeling that we have, with updated data that's been factored into the model since then. But we are also, based on the new methodology, looking at a broader picture. So we have more data because of the state modeling that we are doing. So we're looking at things like modeling diversions and pumping, looking at a field level water need, getting water loss, the conveyance and the pumping losses, the ditch losses, and applying, of course, all of that to the 5 scenarios that we've got. So, and on that end, Russ might speak to this as well, but we have been doing some more outreach with some of the more complicated basins with agricultural water use. So we had some meetings in the Republican, the South Platte. We're going down to the Rio Grande next month, Arkansas in September, but to really talk through some of their agricultural water use issues and make sure that we're representing things appropriately in the model. As far as the data rollout is concerned, the timeline that we have been working with is to, again, finish up the study completely by a year from now, by June of 2019. But by the end of this calendar year, by December, to have a lot of the data and tools to be able to roll things out. So for example, we've got population numbers that we're working now on updating based on the State Demographer's Office information that we have. So that is not yet released, but we're close to having some good numbers there. We do have the draft that was actually published on the website that was a part of that initial methodology documentation that was out there. The costing tool as well. This is another important piece that we're really hoping will be a nice tool for folks at the roundtable level to use, folks that have any projects that they're working on to get better numbers on the costing. This is something that we really need as an agency to have better data to be able to point to what the needs are that are out there. Especially related to all the funding conversations that are occurring with the IBCC and other groups that are currently having funding conversations. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Russ.
Russ Sand, CWCB staff. So as Greg said, we're full steam ahead on the tech review right now and looking at data analysis and modeling. We are also turning our attention really rapidly to engaging with our stakeholders. So that's through IBCC, the Basin roundtables, and some of these more targeted meetings that Greg mentioned through some of these ag discussions that we've had, which I will just reiterate, thanks for letting us into your basins and your homes. These these meetings are pretty, I continue to be humbled by the people that we meet and just the collaborative spirit they have in the innovation. We are looking to that end at the kind of how we communicate around SWASI, and that has kind of 3 pieces that I'll talk about. So the gap analysis, the data visualization, and our communications plan. For gap analysis, we've had these kind of focus groups I spoke to a little bit at the last board meeting, but to kind of put a finer point on these, it's really give us tools to help message SWASI, really tell us about, what the message is, clarify that message, and then keep it simple. So keeping it simple is in some cases unifying around the kind of the Colorado's water plan itself and bringing together that cycle that we have of Colorado's water plan and BIP updates and SWASI itself and really melding those together a bit more. And then also probably dropping some of the death by acronym that we tend to get to. We definitely have an attrition rate of reading when it comes to acronyms. So we're trying to simplify that message and help put together a list of toolboxes and how we explain this. In terms of data visualization, it's really about how can we really effectively and simply message SWASI and show that. I'll quote down in the Southwest, Steve Harris is really fond of kind of this quote of, if you give me something that's a page long, I'll read it. If it's 2 pages long, I may read it. If it's 3 pages long, I'm putting it aside, I may not get back to it. Well, the SWASI is definitely going to be longer than 3 pages. So we have an opportunity with data visualization to kind of help simply communicate this in a way that's instantly recognizable and resonates with both the general public and then the water experts. So, I'll give you an example, but as we talk about these kind of 5 scenarios, it's really difficult to message. And I was down at the Rio roundtable and had a pretty direct question that was given to me about, hey, I read this article and it looks like in Denver metro area population growth and their water numbers may be all off. And they say, well, what are you seeing? I said, well, reiterate the message of, we're doing the analysis now. And, under these scenarios, it could be that under a cooperative growth model, maybe we're closer to meeting our goals, and in a hot and dry model, it might be a lot more difficult. And they response came back, did you actually answer my question? So and he's right. He had a point. We're really having to move from this yes, no response to really helping communicate the maybe, because that's what scenario planning is all about, is all these futures are equally likely and we don't know. And we're looking at this as a planning tool. So we need to get better about how we message this and really that's what we're looking at now. So in terms of our communication plan, this is a lot about kind of setting ourselves up for success and looking kind of at the final product. And I kind of see that in these 3 buckets. So there's what we're doing from now to December. And as Greg alluded to, really looking at that initial data release of probably some of the population numbers and analysis, and probably our costing tool. And then that next tranche of kind of January to June, kind of pre-SWASI report, but how do we set up, really listening to what we heard back from our stakeholders about, communicating this effectively, and do we use, webinars or, technical, maybe doing some kind of town hall meetings, or what would be the most effective way working with the roundtables to help kind of get in front of what we know will be questions at the end of this. So how to, especially some of this ag discussion and just the scenario planning itself, how are we going to message that? And then there's really the July and beyond, because if this, if we're really looking, I'll quote Director Mitchell from our last board meeting, as saying, if SWASI is the technical backbone of the water plan, then we really need to treat it that way. We need to think holistically about that. So what's our plan moving forward as we think about this? So I talked a little bit about, this brand unification, and we're really kind of, in some ways, even though SWASI itself is this kind of an enormous, this enormous thing, I almost included this Leonard Bernstein quote that said, all you need to be successful is a little bit short on time to kind of have a project done. And we're definitely feeling that crunch of, it's a year's going to be here. Next July will be here before we know it. So how do we set ourselves up for success? And how do we start thinking about all of these things moving forward? Because if we start with SWASI now and we're looking at just finishing the SWASI report and we're done, that's not where we're headed. We're really headed to do this analysis, make it replicable, and work with the roundtables on how they can then turn that into meaningful BIP updates. And then ultimately feed that back into what does the water plan look like? And what's the water plan update going to look like? So we're kind of managing all this at the same time, trying to think holistically about it and really target our efforts of where we can catch fire and hit a lot of these conversations at once. So for example, with BIPs, we're working on any number of discussions around that and thinking about how we might, we've done some survey work with roundtables, but how we might issue a bigger survey or develop a working group to help us think through some of these complex issues around not just the BIPs, but even backwards into SWASI. If we're looking at scenarios, key piece of scenario planning is where do you look at these signposts of where you make decisions, and working with the roundtables on what that should look like and what's the time frame. So we have a lot of related conversations also going on with IBCC. The meat, of really what we want to get out of these BIP updates is a bit of more standardization and better yield and cost numbers, so that feeds right back into some of the funding discussions that we've had. Again, listening to our stakeholders on, hey, maybe a roundtable summit would be a helpful thing. At the East Slope Roundtable, and specifically, I talked about, gosh, this is really nice to bring roundtables together, and what can we learn from each other, and trying to bring them together in a meaningful way. Maybe a post-SWASI, roundtable summit is the way to go to really start dialing in on what we've learned, where things are at, and how you update at BIPs. There's also some other issues I know around like our website updating, getting some feedback on that. So we may be able to really catch fire with working with roundtables again on how we think about a number of issues at once and really set ourselves up for success for SWASI and beyond. That's it.
All right. Thanks, Greg and Russ. Question, Don?
So you said you were having trouble with the ag folks.
Oh, not trouble. No, I wouldn't. Well, I'll let Greg jump in too. I guess I wouldn't frame it up as trouble at all. I mean, it's been great conversations, and again, this. Whether it's Nathan Coombs in the Rio or, some of the folks out in the Republican, the stuff they have to deal with compact compliance issues is nothing short of amazing, I would say. And how they're handling it's pretty impressive. But, for us, it's a lot around not having as good modeling and really trying to look at what future ag they think might come out of production, some of the issues around compact compliance that we're trying to better noodle in on. I've got a lot of feedback from, Sandy White in the ARC of, hey, when SWASI comes out, we really want this to be meaningful for us. And we didn't feel that SWASI 2010 hit the nail on the head. So we want to dial this in a little bit more and work with you guys on how you message the gap in particular.
Absolutely. No, that's a great response. And also I was just going to add that because of all the sensitivities with compact compliance with some of those basins that we mentioned, we're being, very careful how things are represented in the model, making sure that we circle back with the Division of Water Resources before anything is released, that we've got everything really dialed in. And then also, of course, representing things appropriately, how the basins, want things represented, especially for those different scenarios. So, for example, we had a meeting with the lower South Platte board with Joe Frank a couple weeks ago, and talking about what they see in the future as potential buy and dry and how that would affect their acreage moving forward, and how to potentially represent that in those different scenarios to really get their story across of what that might look like with those impacts. And of course, the day that we met, there were more discussions about some evolving buy and dry that was occurring, that week. I mean, yeah, exactly. So it's a very real issue, of course.
All right, thanks. Any other questions for Greg or Russ? All right, thanks, guys. We'll move on to agenda item 15, Colorado River Basin Fund Memorandum of Agreement. Looks like we have Carly. Oh, and Alex.
And Alex.
Alex Funk.
Trying to find a way up here. Chairman Yan, directors on the board, thank you for having me here today. My name is Carly Brown with the Interstate and Federal section. I'm joined by my colleague Alex Funk, also in our section, and together we are working on implementation of the Basin Fund Memorandum of Agreement. So today I'm here to provide our annual update to the Basin Fund MOA, and we thought that we would spend a little bit of time talking about the individual types of projects that are included in the Basin Fund MOA. So today is more than just an update on the fund and the issues that are going on. It's really twofold. We want to tell you about our progress over the past year and our discussions with Reclamation, and we want to make sure that you know what projects we're really talking about whenever we're talking about the Basin Fund MOA and the projects that we are working on. And I just want to stress from the beginning that overall, we really view the MOA as a success. The MOA has allowed us to put more dollars to the operations, maintenance, and replacement of different elements of CRSP facilities, Colorado River Storage Project facilities, in our state, and Colorado sees an enormous benefit out of this. So I just want to approach this with that in mind. No matter what we think that there's a lot of good work being done. So today we're first going to give you an overview of what the MOA is and the process that goes along with the MOA. We'll talk about some of the issues that we have been digging into regarding the implementation of the MOA. And again, project overview, we'll hit on what those projects are to tell you what we're really talking about. Alex is going to lead on that in particular. And then we'll go into our next steps. So first of all, just for those who might want a refresher on the MOA or are new to the board, oops, excuse me. The presentation is excited, or I am, I don't know which one. So the CRSP Act authorizes the creation of these CRSP facilities and the creation of the Basin Fund for these CRSP facilities. The MOA itself was signed in 2011 between the Upper Colorado River Division states, Reclamation, WAPA, or the Western Area Power Administration, and CREDA, the Colorado River Energy Distributors Association. So the thing about the MOA that's sort of special is that these hydropower revenues are collected through WAPA, and then they're sent to Reclamation, and Reclamation spends that money, but we, the state, gets to say how we want that money spent. So essentially, we have this very important oversight and decision-making role in the administration of the MOA, and that's fully recognized in the document, the MOA itself. But the way that the fund is administered, the fact that Reclamation receives the money and then spends the money makes it different than most financial programs that we would be a part of. So I just want to underscore that makes things a little bit different. The other thing, we'll get to in a second here. So first I want to tell you what we're talking about when we talk about the MOA. Yeah, this is an excited presentation. So if there's a way to pause it. There we go. So just so you have a sense of what we're talking about here, it's $11.5 million of hydropower revenues that will be collected per year through the life of the MOA through 2025, and that will mean a total of $161 million for the upper division states. Colorado gets 46% of those dollars, and then you can see the divisions out for New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming there. There's also a certain amount of money that is set set aside for basin-wide projects. That was not decided at the creation of the MOA, so it doesn't have its own certain percentage, but it's a pretty small percentage. So in effect, for us, that's about $73 million through the period of the agreement that we will have the ability to designate projects for, and taking out the basin-wide funds that sort of eat into our share. And $73 million is a nice chunk of money. And we, at the onset of the implementation of the MOA, starting for fiscal year 2012, we started identifying those projects early on, and we got a number of projects sort of in the hopper, approved by Reclamation. And so we sort of front-loaded our projects compared to the other states. That's another important note to make here. The way that we carry this out is we have several projects that are either underway or completed or approved and waiting to be done. And Alex will spend a little bit more time talking about what those are. So this is the rough MOA process. First, there's the projects get identified and prioritized. We work very closely with the Colorado River District and with the Southwestern District in order to decide what those projects should be. They really have a good sense on the ground of what the needs are, and we we get on the phone in the spring and we talk about what we want to do with any potential MOA monies. Then we submit those projects to the Upper Colorado River Commission, who is our sort of the agency that officially interacts with Reclamation. So they send those in early July of each year. Then Reclamation reviews and makes sure that it sits within their federal authority as they perceive it, and then they decide if they can implement the projects, and then the implementation process proceeds. So we highlighted implementation here because that is the all of this pieces of the process are fully lined out in the MOA itself. The implementation side of things is not as directly spelled out, and that's what we have spent the past several months sort of digging into with Reclamation regarding how we can make sure that the state has a full role in the implementation, that we're fully involved as partners, since we get to pick the projects and we get to get to define those priorities, that we also have fuller engagement in the way that monies are spent and any issues that might arise during the implementation of a project. So again, that wasn't really spoken to that clearly in the document itself, but we think that, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, we think that just sort of building that communication with Reclamation about what we want and how our level of involvement that we want. And also Alex has been getting very involved in sort of spending more time on the ground. I think that that is one of the things that we'll be talking about that we think is an effective way to address some implementation issues, which we get to next. So bullet number 1, I've already pretty much hit, that the MOA is largely silent on what happens after an approval. So there's a couple of different ways that we've gone about in the past and up to today, working towards developing procedures for those implementations. First of all, there's a prioritization process that happened back in 2014 with the state and with the River District and Reclamation and others to make sure that we identified what our priorities were for each individual CRISP participating project and facility, and to sort of list out one by one which one we want to make sure happens. So we have that report in place that lists those priorities. And we also have some process that was outlined early on in the process, and then more recently, the state spent some time with Reclamation sort of talking about what the project approval process looks like from Reclamation side of things, how they, what their standard operating procedure is, and then what their modification documents and forms are. Ultimately, we spent a lot of time looking at those documents, and ultimately we decided that it was better to move away from having a lot of red lines on these formal documents and more into this realm of let's build our communication here on the ground in Colorado. That's where things are right now. And then finally, there's quarterly reports that we receive from Reclamation regarding their the accounting, and just a quick narrative update on how things have evolved. We have spent some time looking at those reports recently, or taking closer looks at those reports. And this is where one of the implementation and communication issues has arisen that we think that we can improve. The narrative reports, and we included one in with your board memo, list what's happened since the last quarterly update in red type, and then that gets updated with a new sentence every quarter. We would like to see that maybe a little bit more tabular, something that's a little bit easier to read and to track. And Reclamation's fully open to that, and it has offered to take a look at a template that we could send back for what kind of reporting we'd like to see. There's also the quarterly spreadsheets. We've noticed some differences in the accounting, and we think that what we're going to be doing is just do a line by line through the spreadsheets and make sure that we all completely understand and agree what's going on with regard to each individual project. Anything, Tom? So, okay, just to reiterate, the MOA itself doesn't speak to a clear role for the parties in implementing the projects, but we do think that this can be addressed through more communication. We also, as far as the state's authority to approve and manage contract modifications, again, that's not specifically written. Well, it's something that is suggested within the MOA, but it's something that we just want to have more firmly in place, that any modification to a contract, any moving money from one priority within a participating project to a different priority that they're having, that Reclamation is implementing for them, that the state gets to see and sign off on that, and so that we have a full understanding of the way that the money works within the MOA. We're also just asking for sticking to the priority of the projects as defined through that 2014 report that set those priorities, and then also having those continued conversations with the water users themselves about what are the priorities that we have today, and keeping the state as part of that conversation. We want to make sure that the approved budget, that we stay within those boundaries, and that we update any outdated or inaccurate accounting, and that we find cost overruns and we find ways to address them. That's just something that, as I said, we're doing a deeper dive into this accounting, and we're just discovering that we probably just need to keep a more watchful eye on all sides. And so we did this most recently in a full day meeting with Reclamation, which I would say was a active, engaged conversation, and I feel like both sides really got to share their background on the way that they participate in the projects, or the way that Reclamation administers the projects, the way that Colorado views the priorities of the projects. And I think that we came out of that, most importantly, with an agreement to develop a joint communications plan, an agreement to work on these accounting and reporting issues that I've alluded to, and a commitment to the state's involvement in all aspects of project implementation. And so that's both Reclamation making sure that they're copying us and calling us, and that's also CWCB having a higher level of involvement, which is one reason that we're just so grateful to have Alex on board, because he's already really jumped into this and really getting a good handle on the kind of projects that we're talking about here. And so now I'm turning it over to Alex. And Alex, if you'll also add any other points I might have missed along the way.
Thanks, Carly. Alex Funk, CWCB staff. So despite all these implementation issues, I mean, this program remains pretty critical to CRIS projects on the ground. I mean, having gone now through some of the spreadsheet and met some of the project beneficiaries, none of these projects really would be possible without this funding. So, I think Carly and I are understanding that, we are trying to fix these issues, realizing that this is a critical resource that we want to maintain moving forward. And want to kind of make the stuff work. And so with that, I'm going to provide a very quick overview just so everyone kind of get a sense of like what's happening on the ground in terms of, where is this funding going? What types of projects are being implemented through this program? And so I apologize. It's going to cover a lot of ground like very quickly, but if there are any like questions on any individual project, I can take a shot at answering them. So Animus La Plata. So each of these, Carly mentioned, most of these projects are at our CRISP participating facilities, all on the west, obviously on the west slope. At Animus La Plata, a lot of the projects, we've had 4 approved MOA projects. 1 is still active, 3 are complete. Most of those have centered around Lake Nighthorse. So for example, there was funding for a ANS inspection station that has since been installed and has helped facilitate the opening of that lake for recreation. There's also funding for some gauges that are helping with water right administration as well with this project. At Bostwick Park, this is in central Colorado, east of Montrose. It basically consists of Silverjack Reservoir and a series, Cimarron Ditch, and a few other laterals that divert Cimarron Creek to irrigate. I don't have the exact irrigated acreage in front of me, but provide supplemental irrigation for agriculture in this region. There have been 4 submitted proposals. One of those have been rescinded, and we'll touch on the rescinded projects more in executive session. But in a nutshell, there are a handful of projects that the status of which, although they were approved, Reclamation has said that they are not able to work on them. And so they're kind of just like either not moving forward, or they're kind of rescoping some of them to ensure compliance with some of their rules. But we'll get into a little bit more detail. I'm happy to answer more about that later. The one that is active, basically we are looking at automating the outlets at Silverjack Reservoir to allow communication between that outlet structure and other diversion structures throughout the project area. Dolores project, there have been 9 submitted MOA projects. One of those has been disapproved for eligibility reasons. 1 is pending, 5 are complete, 2 are active. Most of the MOA funding for Dolores has gone to replacement of its pretty extensive pump system. So basically, Dolores is one of the few reclamation projects that can provide real-time pressurized water for sprinkler irrigation at a pretty significant scale. And so a lot of the funding has gone to just basically replacing these 20-year-old pumps throughout the kind of sequential part of the entire project. The Frida project, this is in southwestern Colorado, consists of Lemon Dam and a series of ditches and canals downstream of that structure. There have been 5 projects, 2 of those are complete, 3 are currently active. There have been a few projects at Lemon Dam itself. There's been some maintenance done to the gates and also funding for an ANS station, which is currently on hold because the reservoir is closed to motorized boats. So it's one of these projects that's sort of, we'll kind of see where it goes, but it has been approved. But a bulk of that funding has gone to conveyance, ditch lining and piping throughout, I think it's like a 120-mile system downstream, both to help, reduce losses, firm up supplies. And so they're currently kind of going, that project is active. Paonia, this is in, for those of you not familiar with Paonia, it's in the North Fork of the Gunnison. It consists of Paonia Reservoir, which dams up Muddy Creek, and Fire Mountain Canal, which diverts water to Rogers Mesa in the orchards there. The big, kind of focus of the MOA funds at the Paonia project have been kind of dealing with the sediment loading issue at Paonia Reservoir. Muddy Creek is very aptly named. Since 1962, the reservoir has lost 25% of its storage capacity just to massive deposition of sediment. It's caused a lot of issues with their outlet structure, which was not designed to sluice sediment and all debris. So basically, they have to like flush it every year, which caused a blowback, which hurt, like basically destroyed part of this component. So anyway, there's been a lot of ongoing efforts to kind of like address this problem. MOA funds are currently being used to implement a alternative study. So they're looking at some long-term management options at the reservoir. So MOA funding is being used to finance that study, as well as repairs to the outlet structure. There are also several pending projects for the Fire Mountain Canal system as well. Silt. So silt is near silt. It consists of roughly 2 different projects. There's a pumping plant on the Colorado River itself that pumps water out of the river and into a canal and irrigates about 2,000 acres. The other larger component is Rifle Gap Dam and Reservoir, and then a kind of system, kind of a network of canals that branches off of that. There have been 8 projects submitted with this one, 4 of which have been rescinded, 2 are complete, and 2 are active. And we'll talk about this once again, probably more in executive session, but the priority of this system is the Grass Valley Canal. And this is a structure that diverts directly beneath Rifle Falls and more or less is sort of the primary artery for this entire project. It carries project water to different parts of the system, and kind of without it, it doesn't work. But since it's in bad shape. So we were actually at, Carly Lane and I were at this, we got a site tour right before the June 19th meeting and got a tour of this canal. And you can tell that basically it's built on this like very unstable slope. There was like an active mine above it at one point. There's a bunch of debris in the canal itself. There's also the potential it's like built onto the mountain, this mountainside at some points. A lot of potential for either like the canal itself failing or this debris to kind of block it. And if there was, there'd be a huge interruption throughout the entire system. But since this has been sort of identified as a non-eligible project by reclamation, we haven't been able to move forward with it. So it's in this awkward position of like, oh, do we move funding somewhere else, or we find, so this remains like one of our top priorities to get this project taken care of. With Smith Fork, this is Crawford Reservoir and Aspen Canal near Hotchkiss. There have been 5 submitted projects, 3 are pending, 2 are active. There was one project that I didn't list here, the Daisy Feeder Canal, that's also kind of caught up in this rescission issue as well. But basically these projects are all kind of designed to modernize that system, automate some components of the reservoir, do some piping to the Aspen Canal to reduce some seepage losses. And that project is moving forward. The Uncompahgre, God, I can never say this. I had to like write it down 1,000 times today. So there have been 4 submitted projects here, 2 of which are complete and 2 remain active. And a lot of these projects have gone to implementing components of the selenium management plan. That is a part of the Gunnison Basin biological opinion. So there's been funding for a optimization study that looked at the east side of the valley where a lot of the selenium loading is taking place, and looking at projects there to help like with reducing that. And then there's been some lateral piping and efficiency projects as well. And then Dallas Creek. So this is basically it's Ridgeway Reservoir, provides municipal and industrial uses for Montrose and some recreation. They have one submitted project, which would be a ANS station at Ridgeway Reservoir. The status of, and we can go in more detail on this project, but essentially this project is, I'd put it in the pending category. So this is one of the examples of where we were actually approached by Reclamate. So we submitted an approval for this project for about $450,000. Design gets started, contracting gets started. They realized it's going to be over that. Reclamation reached out to CWCB for approval. We, after some conversation, ultimately decided to turn down that, or say no to that approval, just because we were not sure of what the status of other funding is, how this would affect other projects that are on the books. And so that has been canceled at the moment. Technically, we can resubmit with a different scope, but it's currently it's in a kind of like a deferred mode at the moment. Let's see. And then, so that's an overview, very fast overview of some of the projects that are happening on the ground. As for next steps, Carly touched on that we are currently working through reclamations accounting, sort of developing our own internal accounting as well, working with each project to kind of get a better sense of where each project is and where their priorities are, and the status of projects, just so we have a better picture of how much funding we have available for new projects. We are developing a communications plan with Reclamation. They have sort of sent us an invite to develop, kind of more of a structure on how we coordinate these projects moving forward. So we're going to be developing a draft for that over the next month or so, share with them and this board as well. Updates on the quarterly reporting, and then just continuing engagement with the Western office. So with that, happy to take any questions the board may have.
All right. Director George.
Just so you never again have problems pronouncing the name of that river over there in Montrose County, you have a resident expert who knows exactly how to say it. Director Anderson?
Uncompahgre.
Okay.
Now repeat after me. Now, Director, what does it mean?
It means hot water in Ute.
Hot water.
Hot water.
Thank you. Now you know.
I'm in hot water, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Are there any questions for Carly or Alex? All right.
I might just make a comment or two.
Director
My
Anderson.
project is the recipient of those funds. Last winter, the Bureau released a contract in their infinite wisdom for work on the silt project and Uncompahgre. I had some misgiving about that when it transpired, but it went really well. My understanding for both projects. We piped about 2.5 miles of Canal with 48-inch PVC. And it's in use today. We have 2 other projects there. One of them is called the GH Enhancement. That's a politically correct term for a surge reservoir at the end of our project. This summer we've had a lot of problems keeping water to that area of the project. In order to place a call on the Uncompahgre, we have to dry the canal up in Olathe, or the river up in Olathe. You can't irrigate on tails. We can't have excess spills at this point in the system. I spoke with the managers down there this morning, or the water masters as we call them, and agreed to cut the releases from Ridgeway by 10 feet to hopefully decrease the tail releases. So that reservoir would really be a godsend to us and allow us to operate the project a lot more efficiently.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Thanks, Carly. Thanks, Alex. All right. We'll go to agenda item 16, Attorney General's report.
The AG's report is in the board materials, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions for Director Chartrand?
If there are no questions pursuant to statute, I recommend the board make a motion to go into executive session after the break to consider items 17A through F as identified on the board's agenda. This session is authorized pursuant to the provisions of section 24-6-4023A2 of the Colorado Revised Statutes.
All right. Is there a motion to go into executive session after the break? Been moved and seconded, moved by Director Dutton. Moved by Director Dutton, seconded by Director Anderson, that we go into executive session following the break. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will be in recess for 10 minutes and we'll reconvene in executive session. And a reminder that we will have some things after executive session, some loans and other things, so don't go away. We have the report out from executive session. Director Chartrand.
Pursuant to statute, the board went into executive session to consider agenda items 17A through F. Discussion during the executive session was limited to those items and no final decisions were made during the executive session. Thanks.
All right. We'll continue on with agenda item 19, financial matters. Kirk.
Good afternoon, Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. We're going to talk money now the rest of the day. The agenda item, which was at 19A, is the routine review of our financial position. And we're in a unique board meeting in that we just passed the end of the fiscal year, so it's summary time. I could have given you the report going forward, but it's not much different, and it's at such an early stage. I don't think it really provides that much value. Certainly by the time we get to the September meeting and the Finance Committee meeting, a lot of those past activities and our financial audit will be in hand at that time, and a lot of the budget numbers become solid numbers. And so what I'd like to do is walk through where we are today as we start the next fiscal year, kind of how we lined up with the past year. So we're looking first at the construction fund. And again, this is the closeout of fiscal year 17-18. The notable item is line number 3, that cash in from Treasury and loan P&I. We kind of anticipate a certain amount of money to be paid in full each year. And this one seemed to be a little bit higher year than we would have expected. We went through several years where the interest rates dropped considerably. They've been pretty steady for the last 5-6 years. So I'm surprised we had so many paid in fulls this year, but we ended up with about $10 million of early payments. And so that $40 million under projections is about 15 million higher than we're usually projecting. On line number 4 under the current, we have 3 of our 4 installments in from federal mineral lease. We are on target to hit that projected number of about $9 million once we receive the last installment. Moving down the list, the line number 15, the total loans out of the construction fund was about $20 million last fiscal year out of this fund. If you add that to the severance tax number, we're about $75 million this year in new loans. The number that I typically talk through from a budgeting standpoint is about $40 million. So we did considerably more in loans this year than is typical. We've had as low as 15, so you start balancing that out over the years. I still think the $40 million is a pretty decent number to try to anticipate the non-projects bill loans, because there's a difference. We go to the projects bill for anything over 10 million, so these are in that small loan number. 17 and 18, they're unique. We watch those throughout the year. Director George commented on the automatic refreshes. That is line number 18. So we have about $1.8 million in automatic refreshes every year in the statute. And so we try to pay attention to the expenses over the course of the year. And I think we're going to end up spending about half of that in actuality. But I have to prepare for fully funding it in case the board or through those funds do get spent. So again, I'm anticipating about 800,000 spent out of that. You see the projects bill lineup. All of those were as approved by the board and were signed into the projects bill. So I'm showing a total of about $27 million available, plus or minus probably $5 million by the time our audit comes through and we figure out all the details. Shifting over to shifting over to the Severance Tax Fund. Very similar look. I'll focus on line number 4, cash in from severance tax. And so last year we spent a lot of time talking about how volatile and how unpredictable and difficult, and it proved accurate. I think the last time I'd indicated that we had $25 million in receipts, but I just didn't feel comfortable in trusting that number. We were still dealing with significant refunds. it appears that maybe that is a real number. And so I've included that as fairly certain that that's at least the amount of money that we'll have in hand. We still have a couple months of receipts to come in. There's always the chance of some refunds to happen before the end of the year. I think there's some thoughts out there that the refunds aren't going to be as big an impact as they originally thought. I hesitate to even say it because it'll be just opposite next time I stand in front of you. But nonetheless, I think we've got some additional money in severance tax from this last fiscal year to talk about in September. Let's see, moving on to, to highlight line number 17, that emergency agricultural drought grant, that is zero. It's zero. We have in the statute the ability to utilize $1 million for agricultural response to drought. I would assume that we would see some activity with that in next fiscal year, but as of this fiscal year, we did not utilize any of those funds, and so that's a zero on our books for last fiscal year. We'll have $1 million out there available for next fiscal year. And that is all for my report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Kirk? When does the time run out on the refunds? Is it at the end of the year?
It's the 3 years, I think, from the date of that ruling or from that year. So I think we believe it's still 9 months out.
Oh.
I think the end of, does that sound right? Looking at Amy, I think next January is about the end of, I guess that's less than 9 months, but we're within six to 12 months, I think.
Okay.
Which will be that'll be a good moment to get to. We'll still be dealing with a significant fluctuation. The other thing that's maybe of note, the revenue projections, again, lots of asterisks next to that word projections, indicate that severance tax is going to be pretty high next fiscal year. Our quarter for the loan program could be, it's projected upwards of $50 million. And so that's, on average, I say 40 million. So that's an above average year. So I say, yeah, maybe we'll get 25 and be happy. So.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, Kirk. We'll move on to agenda item 20.
19B.
19B. Sorry.
19B, Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. One of the difficulties of being very successful in a loan program is that you don't deal with default payments, default borrowers very often. And so I can't say that the staff at CWCB has a lot of experience with this. We have outstanding borrowers, and we have a project or a loan that was approved back in, I want to say 2011, about a $1.8 million loan. No, I'm sorry, $1.2 million loan. And it was for a reservoir rehabilitation and some work on an additional reservoir that this company had at the time. And, looking at the revenues, when they came in and talked to us originally, we sized them up and said, you don't really look like a farmer. They were investors trying to get agricultural product back into the Arkansas Valley. And that was a message that we like to hear, but certainly it put us on high alert that this isn't a standard loan for us. And so we went to great lengths in reviewing their ability to repay us, and that kind of fell short. So we looked at our policies and what we had available, and we latched onto I think a very comfortable amount of collateral for the loan. And now we are in a situation where they've been late the last 2 years, and this year they were late, and we took it upon ourselves to try to help them through whatever difficulties they were dealing with. We put them on a monthly payment plan. Their $76,000 payment was due March 1. We usually don't get uncomfortable until about 30 days outside of March 1, and then we start ringing the doorbell. Payment and that communication, it did not come in. So we reached out and said, is there something we can help? We're all about getting repaid. We don't really want to get into collections. And they agreed to make monthly payments. And so we divided it by 4. The second of those monthly payments has not come in yet. And so we're the 18th of July, 18 days past when that was supposed to come in. So we're at a position where we're probably going, no, I'm not going to say probably, we will be contacting collections to start moving through the next phase of this process. We believe that our collateral coverage is about 3.5 million to the remainder loan, or their current balance is about 750,000. So from a collection standpoint, you would think we were in good shape, but I think when we start looking under the hood, you never know. There's a lot of complications with going through the collections process. But I just need to make sure that the board is aware that this is the work that we're doing. And we will keep you apprised of our progress at each board meeting until we get this worked out. This is a informational item only. We're not asking the board to make any action on this, unless, I guess, you're welcome to do so if you would like. But that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to field any questions.
Any questions for Kirk? All right.
Can I ask one question? Kirk, has there been any contact from the corporation just knowing that this was going to be on the agenda item?
Multiple phone calls. Seems to be one of us is always out of the office at the wrong time. But yeah, I think the phone calls are upwards around 6 or 7 times. So they are aware that it's on our agenda. Yes is the answer. I probably should have just said yes.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks, Kirk. Okay, agenda item 20. What do we have? Rachel? Water project loans, Chilcott Ditch Company.
Rachel Pittenger. I'll be addressing agenda item 20A, Chilcott Ditch Company, Chilcott Augmentation Station. So the project site is located in the Arkansas Basin near the city of Fountain, right off Fountain Creek. The loan amount is $505,000. Loan terms 20 years at 2.55%. And I'd like to thank Mr. Jesse Schaefer for attending our meeting here this afternoon. The Chilcott Ditch Company was established in 1874 with 105 shares and 6 shareholders. It's about an 8-mile long ditch, and it serves El Paso County and delivers return water to Fountain Creek via the Aug station that we're going to talk about on behalf of the shareholders. And this is a bird's eye view of the area, the project site. You can see the proximity of Fountain Creek on the west and Chilcott Ditch to the east of it. So a little bit more close-up view of the flume and the augmentation structure itself. The company would like to stabilize the embankment, which I'll show you a picture coming up here, reconstruct the outfall, and there's a sand discharge line associated with the structure, taking into consideration the 100-year flood recurrence, stream flow, and water surface profile. Here's the stream embankment I was talking about. Photo on the left is upstream of the augmentation structure, and then the one on the right is downstream shot. So you can see the integrity of the stream bank here. So the goals of this project would be to provide the stabilization to allow for continued water delivery to the shareholders, also help improve operation and maintenance of the structure. Project cost itself is about $500,000, and the anticipated completion would be next year, by next year, I should say. So in summary, project financials, total project cost, $500,000. Total loan with the service fee is going to be $505,000, again at a 2.55% reduced interest rate for the 20-year term. That gives $35,802 for the annual loan obligation for the first 10 years. The ratios do indicate an average borrower, and a further increase to the assessment will be required. Collateral includes the assessment revenues backed by a rate covenant, and then the augmentation structure itself. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Any questions for Rachel? Director Wells?
I'm actually trying to understand exactly what an augmentation station does. I read the description, but I'm not. It measures return flow. But could you please explain the ignorant to the ignorant? Thank you.
So my understanding is it does measure the return flows back to in their AUG plan. This is their return flow station, and Jesse's here. He could probably provide maybe a better description of the operations, but the structure itself is how the water gets back to the river to account and make up for what was taken upstream.
Director Goebel.
Right. I mean, typically AUG stations like we operate a couple of them. They can, most generally in the Arkansas Basin, they're to augment well pumping. So you want to measure back the return flows. Or in other cases, it could be to measure return flows and CU water that you want to move upstream or downstream, whatever. So
yeah, so they're pumping some wells upstream, and this is where they return their water.
Sorry. It says that they provide direct flow irrigation water. So I guess that goes to some of the users. And then it comes back and it gets measured, the return flow to the river. And meaning that the remainder is consumptive use. I didn't think consumptive use was measured that way. I know I can figure out what an augmentation station would be for well pumping. Right. I just don't understand it for direct flow irrigation. But maybe the guy who operates it would like to tell me.
So the irrigated acreage is a lease back. It's all district and municipal owned. The surface water here. So the portion that is irrigated is a lease back.
So this is to offset pumping though of
Yes.
wells?
Yes.
So it is to offset pumping of wells. They provide some direct flow irrigation still, but some of those shares were changed to offset the pumping of wells. So they carry them through the ditch to a certain location, then they dump it back into the river to make up for that pumping. So it's just part of the augmentation.
Let Jesse clarify.
Jesse, if you state
Thank you,
your name.
Rachel.
State your
Yes,
name and who you're with.
Jesse Schaefer. I'm the manager of the Chilcott Ditch Company. Thank you all for having me here today. I really appreciate it. I won't try to take up too much of your time this afternoon, but in light of the question that was asked, yes, we, as Rachel had indicated, there's 105 outstanding shares of the Chilcott Ditch Company, and they're all municipal, local government type agencies that own all of them. Woodmore Water and Sanitation District, whom I'm also the manager of, is the majority shareholder with 58 shares. City of Fountain, roughly 22 shares. They're 22 and some change. Security, Water and Sanitation District is also a shareholder. Fountain Fort Carson Schools, El Paso County Parks. There's a few more. Don't think I need to recite all of them right now, but a number of our shareholders, specifically Fountain and Security and the school district, they actually take receipt of their Chilcott share water through the augmentation station. And a number of them do, exactly as this gentleman over here had indicated, they pump wells. And so they're backfilling the depletions caused to the stream with the outfall or the deliveries out the augmentation station that we provide, that the company provides. Now, further down ditch, we do have agricultural irrigation going on. Woodmore, we actually lease a number of acres to a rancher down there on lands that our water rights are attributable to, or at least our portion of the Chilcott Company water rights are attributable to. They use water for growing hay, things of this nature. We also use it for ourselves in our revegetation processes down on the ranch that these water rights, at least the ones that we own, are attributable to. So the augmentation station, as far as operations go, as far as making deliveries to shareholders, it's not just the Chilcott water rights and making deliveries to shareholders who own those. We also have a number of carriage agreements that the ditch company and various other entities have entered into, where we actually will divert what we call foreign water, water that's non-native to the ditch. For example, Liston and Lovelock. There's a number of other water rights where a change of point of diversion has been done in water court. We will draft the stream, we'll take those water rights, we'll measure them, and then we, measure them off the stream at the diversion. We also measure them out the augmentation station for delivery to the actual carriage agreement holder. So as far as operations of the company goes, the station is a critical part of our operations now in terms of making deliveries and fulfilling the commitments and obligations that the Chilcott Ditch Company has entered into over the years.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jesse or Rachel? Right. Oh, Director Goble.
If there's no further questions, I move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 20A.
It's been moved by Director Goble, seconded by Director Anderson, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 20A. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to votes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks for coming.
Again, on behalf of all the shareholders of the company, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your attention. And thank you very much for having a loan program like this.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
You're welcome. And thanks for coming. We appreciate it a lot. Agenda item 20B, Missouri Heights Mountain Meadow Irrigation Company. Jonathan.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff. For the record, presenting a loan request, agenda item 20B. This is a loan for the ditch piping project phase B to the Missouri Heights Mountain Meadow Irrigation Company. This is a loan for $404,000. It'll be a 30-year loan at 2.05%. Felix Torner is the president, and he is in the audience if you have any questions for him after my presentation. The borrower is the Missouri Heights Mountain Meadow Irrigation Company. They're located just upstream here. The location is locally known as Missouri Heights, but it's roughly northeast of Carbondale, just north of El Jebel. Sadly, the best way to describe where they are is if you were going down to Rudeye Reservoir yesterday and you saw the smoke coming up, they are right there. Just northwest of that. I know they don't like to be known or located by that event, but for the board's information, so you can sort of cite where this is at, that's the area that they irrigate out of. The company was established in 1999. They were actually consolidated from the Missouri Heights Irrigation Company, established in 1919, and then the Mountain Meadow Ditch and Irrigation Company in 1995. So relatively new company, but it's the same water, the same ground that's been irrigating by the same water since the 1900s. They have 10,000 shareholders, 10,000 shares, 54 shareholders, and they irrigate approximately 20,000 acres, 2,000 acres. It's late in the day. I'm trying to speed up, and I'm seeing too many zeros. Hopefully we don't do that when we sign the contract. This company experiences a lot of leakage through their ditch. There's a lot of coarse and rocky soils, and they've been working with NRCS for the past few years, lining or piping portions of their ditch. And so this graphic shows kind of the phase A, phase B, phase C areas of what they're looking at. Phase A was a section of ditch right downstream of Spring Park Reservoir, which is the reservoir. This was also a CWCB loan and a WSRF grant, and this was successfully completed. They do note that this was a much flatter section of their ditch, which is why they chose to line this section. Overall, NRCS's default is to pipe, and that's their preference too. However, for this portion of ditch, they decided to line it. They then skipped Phase B and went to Phase C, and this was 5,750 linear feet of ditch. Again, this was also an NRCS designed project. They did receive $40,000 in WSRF grant funds for this, but cash funded the rest and did not get a loan for this portion. And that was also successfully completed. There are some great pictures of the underground pipe. It's really hard to show that graphic, but just trust me when I say there's pipe underneath there. The bottom picture shows the opening, so hey, you can see the pipe there. Yeah, so that brings us to Phase B. This will be in total about 9,120 linear feet. This section will all be piped, and they are seeking a CWCB loan for this section. The slope within here also allows it to be piped. They prefer the closed conduit through this location because it is traveling through a bit of residential area, so for safety concerns, and as they put, it discourages midnight water rights. I'm not saying that happens, just it could happen otherwise. So they are piping this whole ditch section. Table 2 in the board memo has the estimated cost, total project $774,000. The difference between the total cost and the loan will be made up with the NRCS grant. Phase B1 has already been designed. It's gone through final design with NRCS. That will be bid out this summer for fall construction. Phase B2, which just continues on, that they've submitted for an NRCS grant as well. All indications show that that should be successful, just like Phase A, Phase C, and Phase B1. However, they won't be officially notified until November. If come November they find out that the grant's not available, their company is going to pause on Phase B2 and refigure out how they want to finance that. However, that does not impact the successful completion of Phase B1. They can be completed individually or together. So again, the financials, the project cost $774,000. Again, that is Phase B1 and B2 combined. They're looking at a loan for $404,000. They get a blended interest rate. 78% of our agricultural users, 22% are high municipal users. Those are HOAs in the area that have the water. And so that will have a loan obligation of $19,979. And it looks like their assessments will increase from about $5 to $7 per share to offset this cost. The ratios do indicate that they're an average borrower. And I would classify this as typical borrower, typical project of what the loan program routinely does in and out. The collateral will be the assessment revenues of the company as well as the project itself. And that'll be described as the pipeline. And with that, I will open it to the board if you have any questions for me or Felix.
I was wondering what the plan is for the water that will be saved because it will no longer be seeping through this section of the ditch.
Yeah, so that will allow them to extend their irrigation season. So that water is stored in Spring Park Reservoir. Currently, they're adding about 6 to 7 CFS additional than what they need to release out. So that 6 to 7 CFS saved will be saved in that reservoir for extending the irrigation season.
Any other questions? Felix, would you like to come and address the board? Since you came all this way.
All this way. Thank you very much. We gotten money from you guys before. We really appreciate that. We would never gotten this far with our project. We kind of run out of money because we asked our shareholders to ante up for the later projects, and now to complete this project, we really need your help. We're coming through a rough time with this fire, and it really shows us that how important delivery of water is. We were able to get water to people that needed it at the time, even though our reservoir is super low. With this project finished and the fire would have been more west, we could have gotten water to those people too. But with losing 6 feet of water in that section, we did not have enough water in the reservoir to ship it farther west. So future water, it just seems like it's getting lower and lower, and we need to preserve the water. The reservoir replenishes wells all around the reservoir. By the water being in the reservoir longer, it's going to keep that table up for those people. Right now it's being drained by firefighting and there will be zero water left. So piping is just going to help a huge amount as far as keeping our levels higher in the reservoir and having water later on in the summer. We really appreciate your time and hope you can help us.
All right. Thanks, Felix.
Thank you.
Any questions for Felix or Jonathan? All right. Director George.
Mr. Chairman, if we're ready for a motion, I would move we adopt staff recommendation on agenda item 20B.
It's been moved by Director George, seconded by Director Wells, that we move staff recommendation on agenda item 20B. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all your help. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 20C, Roxboro Water and Sanitation District. Is that you again, Jonathan?
All right, Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff, for the record, presenting agenda item 20C, also known as the last agenda item on your agenda today. This is a loan request by the Roxboro Water and Sanitation District for the Ravenna Development Interconnect Project, seeking a loan including the service fee of $1,584,690. Loan terms would be 30 years at 3.15%. That is the high income municipal rate for that. The contact for this is Barbara Biggs, General Manager. Perhaps might have heard of her before, maybe. Give you a little reminder, a little flashback in time. As Kirk Russell says, you could say she's a Biggs deal to CWCB. No, he didn't say that. That was my bad pun. I apologize. Well, yeah. Always nice to have a former board member back, and gives you hope. Maybe when you are off the board, one day you can see me in your office getting a loan. Something to look forward to. So the Roxboro Water and Sanitation District, this is a loan through their water activity enterprise that they have. But the district is located south of Chatfield Reservoir. And the green area there is the original district service area. The red area is they recently added Plum Valley Subdistrict under them. And then the purple area is the former Ravenna Metropolitan District. Ravenna is now fully under Roxboro's service area. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to refer to Ravenna almost as if they're separate. I think that'll just help in discussing the history. So they are a Title 32 district. They have currently 3,650 existing EQRs, equivalent residential units. Full build out be about 4,361, and they were formed in 1971. So talking about the Ravenna development, this is a community, a fairly recent community, 634 acres, 243 home sites will be there at full build out, 18-hole golf course, 324 acres of open space. This is, if you know the area, I don't want to hide the fact that it's an upscale area. This is a very upscale gated area. But for the loan program, that means high interest rates for us, and it means they can afford the water rates. So that's good news for me. And when you think about it, really, water is water. Even if your house is a mansion, you need water. But that got me thinking, what would it look like if they didn't? And these could probably afford something like this. But that's plan B. They don't want to go to plan B. So let's go back to plan A, get them regular water. This development was created Back around 2002, they were getting their water from United Water and Sanitation District. There were 2 non-tributary wells south of Castle Rock from Bell Mountain Ranch. So it'd flow the 14 miles down East Plum Creek to United's diversion, to the pond there, then 10 miles through the pipeline to another pond to get to Ravenna. They also had their own water treatment plant. They since have been seeing issues with the water supply. The biggest issue they want to take care of is that it was a non-renewable water source, and they knew that long-term obviously does not work. So that was primary goal 1, is find a renewable water source. Issue number 2 is the 10-mile pipeline that you see there just had constant integrity issues that was leading to constant water interruptions. A leak would spring up here, a leak would spring up there, and they were unsatisfied with the performance of that pipeline. Issue 3 deals with the water treatment plant itself. It's simply undersized to serve Ravenna at full build out. And so even if they were to keep the water treatment plant, they would have to do massive rehabilitations to increase the capacity. And it was also poorly maintained throughout history, leading to membrane fouling. And there was no pre-treatment. So to rehab the water treatment plant would require a lot of work, not just switch out a new filter. So that led to the recent history of project timelining, starting about 2015. The water treatment plant started to experience that reduced capacity. That was due to the membrane fouling, and that really just kind of got them going again of seriously thinking of what are they going to do with their future water. So in 2016, Ravenna, they did a feasibility study that looked at different sources, different answers, and the fast forward to the answer was connecting to Roxboro Water and Sand District. That would bring them to a renewable water supply using Roxboro's, and it presents a cost-effective treatment option. When they were looking at their water treatment plant for the size of their development, it just wasn't cost-effective for their small development. So tying into Roxboro solved that issue as well. In 2016, the development voted in favor of including into Roxboro. It was a unanimous vote. And in April 2017, Roxboro went to Aurora, which is their water supplier. They have an existing lease with Aurora, and they were able to amend the lease. They didn't have to increase how much water, but they did have to amend the lease to allow to serve that new service location. So that was completed in 2017. In June 2017, they built an emergency interconnect between Roxboro and Ravenna, just in case something would happen with the water treatment plant or the pipeline again. They would at least have interruptible water through an emergency interconnect. Summer 2017, something did happen. The pipeline went down again for a little bit, and so they switched over to the emergency interconnect. And since then, that has been their sole source of potable water is through that emergency interconnect. In November 2017, the Ravenna Inclusion Agreement was fully signed and executed. Part of that agreement was requiring 2 additional interconnects between the 2 systems to provide the reliability that a water system needs. And so that is the project. Sorry for the long background, but I felt it was important to understand why, how they got to here. So looking at the project itself, the orange-ish shaded area is the Ravenna development. Just south, that's technically shaded blue. That is Roxboro Water and Sand District. So you can see that they are immediately adjacent to each other. This project will install a north interconnect, an east interconnect, a new 12-inch transmission main to bring Ravenna's water storage tank into operation, and relocate a pressure-reducing valve vault. And so also kind of a bad project to have fancy, sexy pictures of. Their pipelines in the ground. So here's an aerial of the north interconnect area. If you can make it out, the Roxboro and the Ravenna water line are parallel to each other already, just showing again how closely connected these 2 developments are. And so this will just tie in Roxboro's to Ravenna on the north. Down on the east, similar Ravenna developments on the left, Roxboro's on the right. So it's just jumping that ridge with another transmission main, and then a 12-inch transmission line just to tie in to make use of the water storage tank that Ravenna has. So jumping over to project cost and the financing of this, the project cost is that $1.7 million number. The design and construction engineering services, that's fully being covered by a Douglas County grant. This has been a collaborative project with multiple agencies, Douglas County being one of them, and so they are providing the engineering services for this. So the difference between that is this loan request. I wanted to talk about the source of repayment funds. It's not as simple as just a shareholder assessment across the board. Roxboro has a philosophy that if they are to grow and add new customers into the service area, it should be those customers that pay for it, not their existing customers. Their existing customers also agree with that. So their plan is for this loan to be paid back by assessing a user surcharge fee only on the Ravenna customers. There's 246 EQRs, again, equivalent residential units. And so for those 246, that's going to be a $31 a month charge on top of their water bill. For the collateral side of this loan, since it is Roxboro Water and Sand District taking on the debt and not a sub-district of just Ravenna, our collateral is based on the entire water activity enterprise revenues for the entire district. So if you look at the entire district-wide, if for some unseen reason, the entire district would be at a $2 per month charge. Again, that's just if we had to enforce our collateral. But the plan is for Ravenna to pay $31 a month. And that got me a little nervous. $31 a month seems kind of a lot to me. Never mind the fact that this is a very upscale development. Still, $31 is $31. So I wanted to look at how the true impact, kind of the net impact. And because Ravenna is now included as part of Roxboro Water and Sand, they no longer have to pay out of service fee for their sewer service, which they've always gotten from Roxboro. So that will be a $20 a month deduction from their total bill. So the net impact per household in Ravenna is only about $11. And then if we look at affordability, the average monthly water bill post-project for the Ravenna customers will be $129 a month, kind of expensive. Per year, almost $1,550. But when you look at the percentage of their annual water bill towards their median household income, they're at 1.45%. The EPA sets water affordability to be less than about 2 to 2.5%, and CDPHE sets that to be less than 1.5%. So from analyzing this from the loan side, this makes me comfortable that they're still well within the affordability range. So bringing us to the loan again, this with the service fee, the $1,584,690. Again, it's the 3.15% for the fully high income municipal rate, and the annual loan obligation will be $90,668. The financial ratios indicate that they're an average borrower, and as I walked through previously, it shows that they can afford this debt. And the loan security will be a pledge of water activity enterprise revenues. And again, that's of the entire Roxboro district, not just a subset for Ravenna. And so with that, I will open it to the board if you have any questions of me or Barbara.
Any questions for Jonathan? Barbara, come on up. You get to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Barbara Biggs, General Manager of Roxboro Water and Sand. I find myself immediately drawn to the nuts. I must sit down at a table and eat too many nuts. I want to give a little bit of credit. I mean, this development was started back in the early 2000s, and clearly bad decisions were made in the very early stages. They made a conscious decision not to join Roxboro from the very beginning, went down a path that cost the residents significant amounts of money with United Water and Sand. The residents of the Ravenna district have had they have had to step up to the plate. So the original developer is long gone. I think one of them lives in Florida now. It is a beautiful development. It's beautiful. The houses are huge, but keep in mind it's joining a district. The vast majority of the residents of the Roxboro Water and Sanitation District are average, everyday working class people. I mean, this is a very different neighborhood compared to the rest of our service area. We have been partnering with Douglas County for probably about 10 years now on working to try to, where we can, assist the county. The county has a very big initiative to try and get people off of non-renewable groundwater and onto renewable water supplies. So this is our second loan with the CWCB as part of this effort. The CWCB loaned us the funds to buy an additional 150 acre feet of water from the city of Aurora to allow us to do that Plum Valley Heights subdivision. So that got renewable water to a number of different subdivisions over in the Highway 85 corridor, near Titan Road, kind of in northwest Douglas County. This project, the city of Aurora, the change we made to our agreement is we have a permanent lease of water with the city of Aurora. We don't own the water rights, but we have a lease into perpetuity for first use of 1,950 acre feet of water. That had previously, the number of EQRs, equivalent residential units we could serve, was calculated based on a 0.47 acre feet per residential equivalent calculation. This amendment with the city of Aurora allowed us to change that to a 0.44. That still gives us a nice cushion. Our average residents use about 0.3 acre feet per residential equivalent. So that gives us a cushion in terms of drought. And we don't want to become one of those communities where we've used up our last drop of water. So this has been a great collaborative effort with the county, who's funding all of the design and engineering, the residents who, literally the Ravenna, the homeowners association, is run by a guy who bought a house. Now, granted, he had money, but he funded out of his own pocket the cost of the emergency interconnect. But it's been the residents of Ravenna, Douglas County, the city of Aurora, and the CWCB as our partners. And I think it's a great project for everyone. And it also helps those working class residents of our district, because more customers, you have more accounts to spread fixed costs across. Our water rates are expensive, but we're also the only community in Douglas County that is 100% renewable water. And I think as you see other communities in Douglas County moving to renewable water supplies, you're going to start to see we're not alone up there there's this graph everybody likes to use, and we used to be alone up there with those rates. But people are catching up with us. And we do honestly pride ourselves on, we charge exactly what it costs to serve water. I mean, we're not sugarcoating it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks. No, not taking the nuts.
Any questions for Barbara or Jonathan? Doctor.
I noticed there's a 10-year pay out that goes beyond that. Is there a renegotiation at that point, or what?
That's showing the annual loan obligation for the first 10 years, because the first 10 years there's a reserve payment that the district will make into their own account. That's 10% of an annual payment. So after 10 years, they have a full annual payment set aside. So then after the 10 years, that loan obligation goes down to what just the debt service is.
Any other questions? So Barbara, can you still use the non-renewable water?
We are.
If you need to.
So as part of this whole deal, this thing took years to pull together. There were bondholders, there was United Water and Sanitation District, which, I spent like 3 hours sitting in my garage one night trying to get this. The deal was delayed over a year because of some of the personalities of the players involved. But I was literally in my garage with Bob Lemke on the phone for almost 2 hours one night because I couldn't go in the house because we had a puppy and she'd start barking if I got home. So I'm sitting in my hot garage trying to get Bob to move. Bob is the grand poobah of United Water and Sand. So as part of this deal, Ravenna owned 424 acre feet of Bell Mountain, non-renewable Bell Mountain water rights. That water now belongs to Roxboro. A portion, about 250 acre feet of that water, is being used to irrigate the Ravenna Golf Course. The non-renewable groundwater is a lot more sustainable as a seasonal irrigation source for a golf course than for a year-round, day in and day out municipal supply. That leaves us with some additional groundwater that came. I mean, there's transit losses. You know this better than I do, Mr. Chairman. That leaves us, so the plan is to move some of we have existing open space irrigation company. So the Roxboro Village Metropolitan District irrigates soccer fields and parks throughout the bulk of our service area, and they currently are using a portion of our Aurora supply, our high quality South Platte supply. Our plan is to transition them off that supply, and then we still own that Aurora supply, so that would free up some additional high mountain supply that we could then use to meet the needs of other areas in Northwest, meet the needs of, there's land adjacent to our service area. We have plenty of water to handle our build out of our service area, but there are properties adjacent to ours that are inevitably going to develop sooner or later, because it's a beautiful part of the metropolitan area. So that'll give us the water, the flexibility to be able to meet those needs for growth. So that's the goal. So there is still that water available. So we own the water that used to be their municipal supply. We own that non-renewable. Castle Rock actually owns the super fragile pipeline, but we own a portion of the capacity in the super fragile pipeline. And so,
sounds
long answer.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that's what I was wondering. And
Yeah.
is it part of the WISE project, the Internet Connect?
It is
or-
not. It
it's
is not. This is separate from the WISE project, although there's a lot of WISE water that'll be used for development just to the east of us.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Director Stolp.
I was curious, you mentioned you were at what, 0.44 per unit.
Mm-hmm. That's our supply.
That's your supply.
Right.
Do you have any covenants, restrictions?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And outdoor watering?
Yes, we do. Yes. We have an approved water conservation plan. We did ours in conjunction with the county so they did the county supported a regional water conservation plan. We also, we are required under our agreement with Aurora if Aurora implements watering restrictions, we have to follow suit. But we, as a matter of course, our everyday watering restrictions are equivalent to Aurora's level 1 drought. So we only allow watering 2 days a week, and we rotate through the different parts of the service area. So people are only allowed to irrigate 2 days a week, and they're not allowed to irrigate between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. And we do go out and patrol. And we have neighbors that tattle on each other. We had somebody self-report. I don't think they intended to, but we had to do we had to do a tie-in. This is actually kind of a funny story. So I'll take a minute to tell it. So we had to do a tie-in for a new development into our water system. So we had to shut the water down. And for a very short period of time, and the phone calls are running, and finally this lady calls and she goes, well, you shut my water off and then you turned it back on and the pressure was too great and you blew up my sprinkler heads. And it's like, well, ma'am, it wasn't your day to water, because we knew exactly where we shut the water off, and it wasn't that area's day to water. And she goes, oh yeah, but this time of year, I just water every day because it's so hot. It's like, thank you for letting us know that. We'll be up to write a ticket. So yeah, we take, it is it's very few of the residents. There are some, and frankly, some of the Ravenna residents are going to need some education. But very few we have a lot of residents that don't even have lawns that get irrigated. So.
All right. Thanks, Barbara. Any other questions? All right.
If there are no other questions, I would move staff recommendation for board item, what are we? 20C. Thank you.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 20C. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks for coming, Barbara. Thanks, Jonathan. And that is the last agenda item of the day. So we're a little ahead of time. So we will be in recess until tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Thank you all.